Welcome to Inflection Points, a podcast hosted by Carla Guzzetti and Tim Harrison for the Office of the CTO of Extreme Networks. This season, we look at the technologies that will shape our lives in the next 5 to 50 years and discuss how everything from avatars to AI conforms with or challenges Extreme's infinite enterprise vision of the future. Extreme's infinite enterprise vision is defined by 3 tenets: infinite distribution, that we are increasingly dispersed around the world. At scale, businesses must find ways to reach everyone no matter where they are. And consumer centricity, technology must be built with the consumer's needs as the driving force, not for its own sake. Join us for Season 2 of Inflection Points, starting now. So we're trying something a little bit different today, aren't we, Carla?
Yeah, we are. And I love different. I love change.
Different is good. Change is good. We're here with 2 guests today already. We have Marcus Burton and David Coleman, both of the Office of the CTO. Marcus is our leader in 5G and David is our wireless expert. Hi, folks. Were you able to find the place okay? He didn't get lost on the way?
Yeah, I'm here anyways. Thanks for having me back.
Thanks for coming back. David, you made it okay?
Likewise, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
The reason we wanted to have these 2 experts here is because we wanted to start summing up the season, right? What have we learned during the season? What are the themes that we've discovered? And we wanted to run some of the expert ideas we heard from our experts and from our guests past our own experts from Extreme. And who better but Marcus and David?
And of course, Marcus and David, you're both deeply familiar with the Infinite Enterprise, seeing it was born from the Office of the CTO. So, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot that we can unpack here.
Well, it's sort of a way of thinking and philosophy here at Extreme Networks. So I think you have to have all 3 tenets of the Infinite Enterprise tattooed on our arms. So
that is true. If you're going to be part of the Office of the CTO, yes, we will get everybody a little bit of a fake tattoo. But really, we have 3 themes we are going to discuss in more detail today. One is customer centricity, one of the tenets of the Infinite Enterprise, as David referred to. We have 3 of them. The second is about customization, and which really is a deeper element of customer centricity. And the third element is about security and human nature, and discussing the big philosophical question about how technology and the natural world relate. Can tech ever make a more natural world? It's a big question, a lot to unpack. Marcus, how would you feel about having a conversation with a robot? I think Mark Hamill was cool with it. Do you think you're going to be able to do it?
Yeah, no. Probably not.
Well, a philosophical debate with a robot. What do you think, Marcus?
You know what's funny, actually? Lex Friedman recently hosted, he's a podcast host. He had Mark Zuckerberg on, and he gave him a CAPTCHA right at the beginning of the podcast. Like they were literally sitting face to face with each other, and he made him go through a CAPTCHA to make sure he wasn't a robot.
I think we should do that in every meeting we have. I think that's a great idea. All right. Anyway, we are getting a bit ahead of ourselves. So let's take a second and really dive in. I want to tee up the first clip. So we were back in episode 2 with Adam Price. Adam is the head of sales at Gravitate Software. And in this clip, he's talking about adaptation and why people sometimes are reluctant to adopt technology and what can be done about that.
So there's the development has got much easier. The equipment has got less bulky. There's another very human trait that we need to consider here as well, and it's adaptation and adaptation, if you like. People actually wanting to use this. Yeah. The first VR headset that I remember seeing must have had a geek factor of like 9. And bearing in mind, if you've got a geek factor of 2 or 3, you're going to struggle to find a girlfriend or boyfriend. That's kind of how the geek factors work.
Tim can relate.
I can relate. Yep.
So you were up there with somebody sees that on you. It's so unusual. It's so different. It's so kind of space age Star Trek that it really, you felt a bit of a fool wearing the equipment. And I know that a lot of people that had offered to have a go were just genuinely embarrassed. They didn't want to wear it in front of their partners or colleagues because they were embarrassed to actually wear the equipment. Whereas now people and wearables are becoming, they look cooler, they're getting smaller, but also I think people are just more happy to put a device on these days because, we wear headphones to make calls, we wear kind of earbuds. Bluetooth headsets used to be a laughable thing as well, but now you can kind of quite happily wear those as well. So
wearables are a lot more popular than they used to be.
So this is what I hear coming out of this. Technology is becoming a more natural and normal experience. And this is a two-way street. In part, people need time to get used to tech, right? In part, tech needs to move towards people and become more people-friendly. Is this the dynamic, or do you see it working differently? Marcus, David, either of you?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's kind of it's an oversimplification, I guess. But if tech doesn't move towards people, it fails. It always moves towards people. It has to, or else no one pays for it. So it goes away.
Do you think that nobody pays for it? I mean, I'm thinking of certain, well, I shouldn't mention any particular technologies that might get us in trouble, but there are some technologies that have been, I guess, somewhat fundamental to how we do business or how we live. They're not terribly user-friendly, but they have solved a purpose to some degree. And, I wouldn't want to point out networking, but networking is very complex in many ways, and it's become so important to us and so ubiquitous, but there's still elements of complexity and a lack of user friendliness. I know we try to put a spin on that, but can we look at how the network, for example, needs to become more user friendly to solve problems?
Well, there's no question. I think the days of companies just building a one size fits all widget and shipping it and expecting the consumer to buy it and use it, those days are kind of over. And as a matter of fact, let's face it, consumers very often, they should actually be driving the market, including with enterprise networking. Okay. I think the whole concept of the consumerization of IT actually applies here. And what I mean by that is we've seen this in the past where people adopt technologies at home and before it even finds its way to the enterprise. Wi-Fi is a perfect example of that. It was first adopted at home. People used it, they loved it, and actually forced the enterprise to deal with it, even though the enterprise was pushing back. So at the end of the day, all of networking and a lot of technology needs to adapt more to being more consumer-centric, user-friendly, and what the user actually wants. And sometimes there's failures along the way too. So the one big company that tried to come out with the glasses that had a bit of augmented reality.
What company was that?
So it failed because people kind of pushed back that people didn't want it. It might have been ahead of its time. But because now we're starting to hear rumors that another company is thinking of coming up with something similar, and hopefully they've learned lessons from what the feedback that other company got from very specifically the consumer.
But what's interesting, David, about the example that you just brought up is that it failed because it actually didn't consider all of the customer elements in that experience, right? What were some of the reasons why it failed? Because there wasn't a way to tell people if they were taking pictures of other people. People couldn't understand. There was no way to flag what that person was doing without other people understanding it. And that was one of the largest pushbacks behind it, which I think is an interesting point to consider because it actually failed because while it was consumer centric, it didn't consider all of the consumers in that environment. And I think it's a good example of, maybe it was a little bit before its time, but I also think that they hadn't considered the full experience of it.
Yeah, I guess you could say it was consumer centric for the individual wearing those devices, but not the people around them.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, when in the days of the bulky, big headpiece and with helmet and whatever, I mean, you knew that the person was doing it, and it was an individual's experience. It wasn't an experience out in the augmented reality world where other people have to confront you in that. If you were doing that, they would laugh because you had a big helmet on and you would run into poles and stuff. But yeah, as we start to pivot towards that being an acceptable thing that somebody can use in public, then it does bring up what is the experience, not only for the user, but the person on the other side of that, which I think is really interesting. And Marcus, you talked about, it has to inherently be user-centric, from a, not a philosophical argument with a robot position, but, if we look at, what is that push and pull? How do you find the middle ground effectively of, crazy headgear that doesn't make sense to something that is so hidden that you don't know it's being used, to being able to allow everybody to accept this as a cultural thing?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing for me is like time. It's like what's natural today is something that's more likely to be like expanded on in the near term future. But something that feels unnatural or odd today, you need this like grace period where people get used to the possibility of this, seemingly unnatural thing, which is why, when it comes to wearables, it's like the real wearables that have been successful are basically something that's related to ears and your sound, or a watch, because those were two sort of natural things that, if you think about like a watch, people have been wearing those forever. But when it comes to even like headsets for like communication or for listening to music, it wasn't even really the headset that changed first. It was the portability of voice or music systems that changed. And then that sort of like forced the change upon the headset to become smaller, more portable. But we actually went a long time between, like, let's say the creation of the first sort of portable music device and the evolution of, the listening or like the audio experience that we have today. And it's like a full 20-year cycle. Which in technology terms, that seems like an eternity.
Yeah, that's a good point. Nobody was carrying around just a record player, but the creation of the Walkman trademark, or the portable music player did allow for us to have a different experience and a different relationship with music, which I think it led to the evolution. So that's a really interesting point. I like that concept of the user's experience actually changed the consumption of music, the model of the consumption of music, and the knock-on effect was that we changed how we connected it to us through headphones and through different means of wearing headphones, as it were.
I think that there's an element of like the consumerization of technology that's almost like you almost have to picture a person following around other people and like taking notes on their activity. It's like humans are constantly changing, so it's like what you think of as something normal today is something that's abnormal in the future. Like think about like the Uber model of like replacing taxis is like, it's not just about new technology, but it's about like the user expectations shifted over time. And it's like, if you're observing the shift and observing the technologies that are available to like address the shift, is like, that's where the intersection actually becomes meaningful, I think.
I think it's generational too, right?
It is.
We're talking about music. I once tried to explain 8-track tapes to my kid. Wasn't very successful at that. So.
Well, maybe augmented reality can take us down that path. The observability of behavior, Marcus. Maybe that's a scary thing or not, but perhaps that's a way to do it.
Well, there's probably another area here as it relates to, augmented reality and any wearables really is like the sense of trust, because there's like, you always sort of wade towards things that are a little bit dystopian here. It's like more sensors capturing, not just audio today, which is everywhere, but also now like biometrics with your watch, and the possibility of, video, like you mentioned, Carlo, is sort of like conspicuous ways to record video. No one really trusts that, but you're sending data through these systems to someone. And so there's an element of trust here where you have to sort of look at adoption of wearables or adoption of tech as like, who's doing this and why? And especially in the wearable industry, just to talk about even, I'll just say the company names, we've avoided it, but, it's like Apple, for example, their business model is built around selling you a device. And so, your willingness to pay is basically like the value is the device, right? Mm-hmm. And like the cool factor of the device and the ecosystem that's built around it. Whereas if you look at so many of the other companies that are focused on wearables, so, Google, Meta, any of these other types of companies that focus like that, even Amazon has like Echo, glasses right now. It's like their business model is actually not the device and like the experience of the device. It's actually something else. It's like ads, for example. So like the business is like get you to wear their thing so that they can get your data, so that they can give you, a better ad experience. Like there's a kind of trust, I think, that's implicit in this idea of like, am I going to wear the wearable for my own value, like my consumer centric value, or like, are they getting the value out of me because they gave me this thing for free? I mean, it basically becomes a loss leader. Here's a free thing, wear it and let us use your data for, whatever our reasons are. Like, I mean, those are sort of like the business model bifurcations that are happening around wearables.
And that's going to be the balance, I think, for every company as they focus more on how they can create technology that is going to be more readily integrated into our lives. And then what do we do? What does the business do with that data, and how do they leverage it so that it's comfortable for both the business and the consumer? I think that is something that is going to be a struggle as it moves forward, and something to consider. But I think the takeaway from the episode and this conversation is that, there's going to be more technology in our lives because, the human condition, and for every person, we have to be paying attention to more than ever before. And technology is going to be there to be able to make it easier and less complicated. In some cases, maybe even making it more complicated. But we have to put the consumer at the center of it, and to see how it better integrates into our lives overall, and if that impact is both good or bad.
Yep, that's well said.
So the what we want idea seems to be a key theme running through every episode. Every guest we had this year was talking about building technology for people, not because it could be built. Victor Ripperbelli of Synthesia wants to make it so people can record all of human history in video instead of text. Philip Reese of Indro Robotics uses drones and robots to do work that humans can't do in many cases, and get to places more efficiently than we can. The ultimate example of that was Nisha Keshavan, whose company Design Duality takes customization to an intense level. Carla, we had an interesting discussion about this. Would you like to talk about Nisha's company and perhaps not allow me to step my foot in it?
I'm still waiting to see you in that. Sorry, Tim. But I have to say, Nisha's company and what they're doing at Design Duality, to your point, Tim, is truly customer centric and the definition of a company that is being defined by the Infinite Enterprise. It is a company where people from all around the world can order bespoke Indian garments from tailors and seamstresses in India, and they upload all of their measurements entirely via their mobile app. It's their body is scanned, and then they get something delivered to their door that is completely made for them by a local designer, a local tailor, and they can do this from anywhere in the world. I mean, you can be, getting your own customized design done at midnight in New York and get it back to you in the next 2 weeks. That is the definition of it. It's consumer centric. It can be done at scale, and it can be done anywhere.
And what's key to that is how specific she gets. Let's listen to her spell out how she's trying to deliver a custom experience and custom saris through her app.
So we have started our journey with the ability to measure yourself as, for tailor-made clothing, using our app. So you can actually get tailor-made clothing. Our app provides about 27 to 30 measurement points across your body with an accuracy of 1 centimeter. And you are able to choose, designer clothing from across India, where we are starting off now. But eventually, we kind of go global with the designer presence. So you are able to get tailor-made clothing. And the added fillip that we've added to our app now is that, you can actually customize certain aspects of your garment. If you want a different kind of neck style, you want a different kind of sleeve, or, anything in your pants, or, some additional accessory that you want to add to your clothing. I can, quite confidently say there's no other platform that allows that right now, because, the ability to customize your garment as well as get it tailor-made and, shipped to your doorstep. We are the first ones for you.
It's incredible. I mean, 27 to 30 different measuring points with an accuracy of 1 centimeter across your body. I mean, in some cases, that might be my worst nightmare, but in other cases, it sounds fabulous. It's so precise, and that level of customization in an app, why wouldn't people buy that? Even if you had a sari shop down the road, why wouldn't it just be easier to be able to take in that kind of measurement at home rather than having to go and have someone measure you? It's a little awkward. And I think that's who wouldn't want that? Isn't that always going to win?
Well, I think that's the key question, and we debated it in the episode. Does customization always win? Marcus, when you think of customization of things like what you wear, does that mean a lot to you? Is that important for you? Is that something you're looking for?
Well, I mean, on a personal level, I feel like the older I get, the more it does. And I would even say the more likely I am to actually pay more for something that's better and actually probably enjoy it more. It's usually more comfortable if it fits better. It lasts longer because I actually like wearing it. So there's all these sort of like intrinsic values to something that's customized. What's really fascinating about that business model is that it's really like software that enables her to do that, but it's ultimately like the thing that's being personalized or customized is actually like hardware. It's like a hard good, where typically I think of this in reverse order, which is like the hardware is actually really difficult to scale. And so if you think about like anytime we say personalization or like extreme personalization, we typically think of like common platforms where it's the software, the service itself that's actually being customized. But it's like, let's say, I don't know, like any like streaming device, you get one single streaming device that connects to your TV. There's only one hardware model, but it's the software, the experience of the streaming service and all of the available content that's like hyper personalized. And that's primarily delivered through software. So like, it feels like a reverse model. So it's really cool. And hopefully, if they can scale that well, it'd be successful. It's an awesome idea.
Now, David, I'm going to use a Star Trek reference. Is this
is that an apology?
Yes, to any and all. Is this close to a replicator? Is this us being able to say, "Hey, I want this thing, and it has to be specific to me"? Is that technology? Is that the concept we're going for here? Do you think it's heading in that kind of direction?
Well, I think we're moving to the old adage of there's no such thing as one size fits all. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So when I listened to that clip, it made me think about my first trip to Thailand, like 18 years ago. And on the streets of Thailand, they have tailors where you can walk in and get measured for a custom suit. And they literally make it for you in one day, and, for a lot cheaper than what is done in the United States. So I was told about that and did that. Now there's evidently a way to scale this, right? It can be scaled using an app and can be done from your home. So that being said, customization, I think, is happening in a lot of industries. There's customized healthcare. Customized nutrition and fitness. And you could even apply that to enterprise networking as well. Now, I'll say this, there's still a need for standards, right? So there's the standards bodies like the IEEE and the IETF, and they create standards on how things will work in enterprise networking for interoperability purposes. But you could even say that customization has been going on at the enterprise level for a long time because for competitive reasons. A friend of mine a long, long time ago told me standards are merely guidelines, right? So we have these guidelines, And then companies like Extreme Networks and some of our competitors, we try to work within those standards, but tweak them and customize them to the needs of our individual customers. But at the end of the day, I think we're moving to a place where eventually even we'll start having customized user experiences over enterprise networking.
And you know what I think is interesting about that, David? What while you were talking, what it made me think about is how customization, the responsibility of customization over time. It used to be you would buy something in enterprise networking and it would be one size fits all for everything. And it would be incumbent upon the customer to customize it for themselves. And that shift that we're seeing is now it's the responsibility of the business to find and to deliver a product that the customer can really tailor to their specific needs. Or we have a solution that can meet exactly what they're looking for. And it's interesting because it maps exactly to Niche's business model and what they're trying to do with design duality. And we're, to your point, seeing that in the networking space and in so many other places. And that responsibility now lies with the business rather than the customer.
And it should be conversational too. So it's because, once again, as we've said several times, one size doesn't fit all. I mean, even early in a sales cycle with a company like Extreme Networks, when we're talking with potential customers, we should be asking questions like, tell us about your business and let's try to figure out how we can fit and how we can help your business model, as opposed to, oh, here's our switch, buy it.
Yep. And that is the trend. And so I think the answer that we're coming to here is customization is always going to win. And we're seeing it in a lot of places. And actually, customization is no longer the responsibility of either the business or the individual, but actually it is the responsibility of the company to be thinking about how do they deliver that to their customers.
Yeah.
I think there's also like a sense of time pressure on that. Like the hunger, I think, for customization has grown, and I think it's shortened the window in which you can deliver customization. Because if you think about, I mean, again, like using networks as an example, I mean, you know, vendors have some like array of hardware options. Once you choose that, that's kind of a fixed component, but then it's the software that allows you to really like customize beyond that. And it takes time, you know, you follow best practices in design and you sort of evolve the customization over time. And let's say after 6 months or a year of deployment, you get things kind of dialed in and then it's kind of more stable. I think especially in the world of AI, like that time window has shortened dramatically. It's like what's custom and what's fit for me and my business, my enterprise, like my experience. It's like you got to figure that out pretty quick because there's just low tolerance for something to not really fit well in the short term.
Well, exactly. I mean, what we're talking about here is time to value. Right. And Marcus, you said it at the very beginning when you said, hey, I prefer clothes. They last longer when they're tailored to me. I've gotten more used to that as I've gotten older. I think it's because as people we're expecting that value to hit us faster. And the faster that a company can deliver that level of customization, the happier their customer will be and the more value they'll see in the product.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what we've learned from Niche is that people want custom and that they want a process that feels natural. We learned that from Adam and his VR glasses. So now what? So now what is people want to be safe. They want security. It's a basic human need. And this is where our third clip comes from. He has a custom experience. He's working in biometrics, and there's no more custom item than your individual DNA. That's right. It's completely unique to you. Alex Kitroff of I&D R&D wants to simplify our world by making security a frictionless experience. He spoke a lot about everything being more in a more natural state. Despite your retinas needing to be scanned, it feels pretty unnatural, and he wants to find a way to make this a bit more natural.
What we're doing at ID R&D is we're doing biometrics. We're doing biometrics and we're doing liveness. So we're developing core technologies that answering two core questions when it comes to authentication and personification of services. And these two questions are, is this the right person? And secondly, is this a person? And from the point of security, sometimes the second one is actually even more important than the first one. And then the way that we're doing it is kind of distinguishes ourselves from the rest of the market, because we're putting a lot of emphasis on ability to deliver these capabilities in a frictionless way. The core idea is that we as humans, when we see each other, when we meet each other, if we met before, we don't ask ourselves for passwords or driving licenses. When I'm gonna home today, I'm gonna see my wife, and she's not gonna ask me for my driving license to make sure it's me. She knows me, right?
She doesn't?
Well,
I should get my husband to stop doing that.
So, David, we didn't check your driver's license before we started this call.
We should have.
Perhaps we should have. Nor did we check your retinal scan, Marcus. But are we here yet? Are we at the point where this makes sense? Are we at a world where we're ready for our bodies to become our security? Or does that make it frictionless? Will we accept this as technology? What do you think, David?
Well, I have some personal experience in this. So right after the Mumbai terrorist attacks, every time David Coleman flew back into the United States, he was taken aside and grilled by Homeland Security. Because there was an individual named David Coleman Headley that was born almost the exact same date as me, and he was a terrorist. And for a long time, they were looking for him. So I understand the importance of authentication and verifying identity. The problem was that this went on for years, even after this gentleman was arrested and put in jail. You can read all about it on a PBS, or watch it on a PBS Frontline TV special. This gentleman caused me problems for about 8 years.
Wow.
Now, we have a technology now like facial recognition, and it wasn't around back then, but it's here now, actually. I can go to the Atlanta airport right now, international airport, and once I'm past security, I don't even need a ticket anymore to board a plane. As a matter of fact, there is no tickets. My face is the ticket. It's a little freaky at first, but sometimes I think about it and go, I wonder if they had had that technology during those 8 years where I was grilled for an hour every time I flew back into the country. If they had had that technology, I could have just gone on through, especially since that gentleman had 2 different colored eyes and I have the same colored eyes.
Wow. That's unexpected and quite a story, but yeah, it does lead to the question of, how advanced is the technology? Is it frictionless yet, or has it become frictionless? Because, if we can do those kinds of things now, how far can that go? How far does that go into our lives? Marcus, if you're feeling particularly safe and secure in using your physicality, your liveness, as Alexi pointed out, as your means of authenticating or being able to prove yourself, do you think that that's something that you at this point in your life could accept as a means of security or identification?
And I think for me, like, I know it's sort of anecdotal, but like, you think about like sort of the evolution that we've already seen, like mobile phones with biometrics is like, the thumbprint scanner and all of that. Those never worked for me. I mean, I would have to put in a new thumbprint every 2 weeks.
Really?
It would work for a bit and not work. And, now we're on sort of like the next generation. So using like Face ID. My daughter, her face can unlock my wife's phone. And, they're similar looking, but not, it's not like identical twins or like, the distinction is like significant enough. She's a teenager. So, so I have just to answer that question, I mean, I don't really trust it, honestly. And yet, like, I think there's something that's like deeply, like, it's hard to sort of characterize like why we trust things. Like there's something, even like in that example, is like your wife, or your spouse doesn't like authenticate you, because there's something that we learn about trust. And then there's something about like the human like condition of like trusting something that we can see and understand, like a physical lock or like a key to a car, like it's something that's very easy to understand. Is like that's your access mechanism to get to that thing. And I think like the more sophisticated and complicated technology gets, it's like the less we understand it in a way, which makes it harder to trust in some ways. I mean, to some extent, we trust it really deeply when we do online banking and all these things through our phone already, but there's also something about it that the less we understand, the harder it is to trust.
That's fair. And from my perspective, I sometimes have trouble identifying faces. So I can see the same person a few times and sometimes it just doesn't stick. So I don't actually recognize them right away. So I do recognize my wife, which is fortunate.
Is that why you keep on asking what my name is, Tim, every time we start?
Well, that's why you introduce yourself and I introduce myself. Problem solved. But maybe my brain is at that point where your phone is, right? That it's still trying to process those features in such a generic way, maybe, or not a very precise way. That it can make assumptions, and it's making assumptions that take us outside of that secure realm. Mm-hmm. That's a fascinating experience. I've had problems with facial recognition a few times, but I think it was just my haircut. But David, does that worry you, if you will, when it comes to your recognition and what that means for how people make assumptions about who you are and what you're doing?
I agree with Marcus, but I will say this, Tim, I know this is a podcast, but I know what you look like and I could pick you out of a lineup any day.
Hopefully you never have to be called in to pick me out of a lineup.
That being said, I think Marcus always has a good point here, because it's when you start talking about using yourself for security credentials, it's like, who are we giving ourselves to? And as somebody that often has my own distrust of big government and big corporations, it can be worrisome. So it's basically a balance. And, these kind of things, I hate to say this, they might need to be regulated so that they're not abused. I think historically, if you look at technology, in general, technology can do wonderful things. It always ends up doing wonderful things. You're talking about somebody that grew up on black and white TV, who probably before he dies is going to be living in holograms. But that being said, technology can be abused, right? When we start talking about using ourselves for frictionless technology, in general, I'm for it, but we just, probably should keep a watchful eye on it as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think so. What we're saying here is that there are definitely benefits to it, and it makes things easier. People are more comfortable banking on their app than they've ever been before. David is completely fine that the government is recognizing his face. He is no longer a terrorist. These are all benefits, but there is also.
He is no longer suspected of terrorism.
A suspected terrorist.
Thank you.
Let me just outline that. He is no longer a suspected terrorist.
There we go.
We can confirm that. But, there are so many benefits. And I think that it's very natural as every generation starts to evolve technology. They're going to expect things to be more and more frictionless. But there's still a point of the technology we have today is still not ready for where we need it to go. And there's a lot for us as a society to consider about as far as security and how far we let it go into our lives. But it is something that is coming. It will continue to grow. And I think, taking a moment to take a step back here at all three clips that we've talked about around customization, consumer-centric, and making customization and frictionless, it's safe to say here that this is really where technology has to go in every industry, because it is a demand that society is going to have moving forward. And I think the pandemic has really accelerated that in our need to be apart from each other. And our new normal now is to expect that. So there's going to be so much more to expect as far as consumer-centric technology, it being integrated into our lives. And I look forward to having my face scanned to make sure that I am not a terrorist. I mean, David, I should
be suspected of being a terrorist.
Suspected of being a terrorist. Yes.
That's right. And if you could get your face scanned to get your own sorry, I mean, we could bring it all together.
Even better. I mean, yes, sorry, while going through the airport, even better. But
Wonderful.
I digress. Thank you so much, David and Marcus, for joining us for this show. It has been so helpful to get your thoughts on all of the wonderful conversations that we've had over the last season. And, as always, from the office of the CTO at Extreme, it's great to have you both.
Oh,
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see and recognize you both. Thanks so much, Carla. We will see each other again soon.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, you will.
Join us for our final episode of Inflection Point Season 2. We asked the question, are we building technology for people or simply because we can? Has our approach to technology changed? Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.